Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Matt Buccioni, Infection Prevention Specialist at Virox Technologies, creators of Prevention Disinfectants. Today, I'm going to be talking about how 5 sanitation myths can get in the way when you're trying to develop good sanitation practices, and how busting these myths can help you elevate your cleaning and disinfection protocols to the next level. So our first myth is that if a surface looks clean, it means that it must be safe from the threat of infection. So if you walk into a spa and everything looks clean, that might give you comfort that, you're walking into a clean and sanitary environment. And while it's definitely important to maintain a clean facility for a variety of different reasons, we know that looks can be deceiving when it comes to cleanliness and safety and the relationship between those two things. So the main reason for this is that germs are invisible to us. We can't actually see germs on a surface. So even if a surface looks clean and there's no signs of dirt or debris, it can still be carrying harmful germs that can be picked up by an unsuspecting client or by you and your team, and that can result in infection and illness. So the more technical term for germs is pathogens, and there are 3 main types of pathogens that you might encounter in a spa environment. So the first one is viruses, which includes things like the common cold, influenza, respiratory viruses, including COVID-19, but also things like bloodborne viruses. And examples of those might be hepatitis B and C, as well as HIV. Um, and while cold and flu viruses are often spread through droplets when we cough or sneeze or even talk, viruses can also land on spa surfaces and be transmitted to the next person that touches that surface. Bloodborne viruses, on the other hand, are spread through contact with the blood or bodily fluids of an infected individual. So whenever you're performing services where there might be accidental breaks or cuts to the skin, so if we're talking about things like nail services or aesthetics, certain precautions are going to be needed to prevent the exposure to bloodborne pathogens. Bacteria can include organisms like Staphylococcus, so that's more commonly known as staph, which we know can cause skin infections. But there are also drug-resistant strains of Staphylococcus, including MRSA, that can cause more serious infections if they're not treated in a prompt fashion. Like viruses, bacteria can be spread as a result of improperly disinfected surfaces and tools within a spa environment. And then last but not least, fungi can also cause infections in spas. And the more common ones that we might see are nail infections, so often caused by a type of fungus called trichophyton. It's the same type of fungus actually that causes athlete's foot. We can also get scalp infections as well. And so it's also important to ensure that disinfection protocols are in place to kill fungi on surfaces and equipment, as well as viruses and bacteria. And as we'll touch on later, spas that perform pedicure services using foot baths are going to need to be particularly mindful about the risk of fungal infections. So I think part of the reason that this myth exists in the first place comes down to confusion around some of the key terminology related to infection prevention. So for example, some might assume that if a surface is clean, it's also going to be germ-free and safe for clients and staff to come into contact with. But the definition of cleaning is that it's the process of removing dirt and debris from a surface, which is not the same thing as actually killing germs. It might be removing some of the germs from the surface in the process, but it will not make a surface safe because there might be enough germs left behind in order to cause an infection. That being said, cleaning is still very important from an infection prevention standpoint because you need to get rid of any dirt from a surface in order to be able to disinfect it properly. So cleaning prepares a surface for disinfection, since a dirty surface can't really be disinfected properly, but it is not the same thing. And to make matters even more confusing, there's another term that also gets thrown around a lot, and that's sanitizing. And that's, a term you might hear being used interchangeably with disinfecting, but it actually means something different. Sanitizing reduces the amount of bacteria on a surface, but sanitizers are not designed to kill other types of pathogens like viruses or fungi. So they might be okay for certain environments like a food service setting. Spas are going to require a higher level, and that's where disinfection comes in. So you can see that disinfection is the process of killing germs or pathogens on a surface, and that includes bacteria as well, but also viruses and fungi. And disinfection is going to be what's required for surfaces, tools, and equipment in a spa environment in order to keep clients and staff safe. And so going one step further, sterilization is the process of destroying all forms of microbial life on a surface, which is a higher level of kill than what you might get from disinfection. And often this is going to be done using an autoclave, which is, uses a combination of heat, steam, and pressure to kill pathogens. And this might be required for some high-risk equipment, depending on your state board requirements. It's not going to be necessary or practical for most applications, particularly work surfaces throughout your spa. And lastly, sanitation is simply a broad term that refers to many different types of measures that are geared toward promoting health and keeping a facility clean and safe. So a big part of this is infection prevention, which we're focusing on today. But it also includes other measures, so things like laundering fabrics, ensuring clients and staff stay home when sick, as well as other various practices as well. So not only are cleaning and disinfection important to prevent infections, but this is also a regulatory requirement for spa professionals. So basically all state boards require the use of an EPA-registered disinfectant on surfaces and tools as part of a spa's daily operations. And the reason that I mentioned EPA-registered disinfectants specifically is that all disinfectants need to be registered with the EPA in order to be approved for use really anywhere, but spas and salons are no exception to that rule. So if you're looking at your disinfectant, you should be able to find an EPA registration number on the product label. In addition to mandating the use of an EPA-registered disinfectant, state boards are also going to require that certain infection prevention protocols be in place, including cleaning and disinfecting the various tools and implements after client or staff contact. And those basic elements are consistent across states and different municipalities, but the specific requirements might differ depending on where you're located. So we always recommend that you familiarize yourself with the requirements that are put in place by your state board, just to ensure that you're going to be fully compliant with any of those specific requirements. And we also have a resource on our website as well that allows you to search for the individual requirements by state. So definitely recommend you check that out. So you might use cleaners and disinfectant products at home and be wondering if there really is a difference between these products and professional disinfectants designed for spa and salon environments. And the answer is yes. So household products are perfectly fine for home use, but they really won't cut it in a higher risk environment like a spa where you have multiple clients coming in and out throughout the day. So spas should look for an EPA registered hospital grade disinfectant that's going to be effective against all three main categories of pathogens that I mentioned. So viruses, bacteria, and fungi. Specifically, you can look at the disinfectant label to make sure that the product is virucidal, fungicidal, and bactericidal. And that'll give that confidence that you'll be covered against the broad range of potential germs that might be present. So as I mentioned earlier, this is also important from a state board standpoint. So choosing an EPA-registered hospital-grade disinfectant, such as prevention, will ensure that you're meeting state board requirements and you'd be able to tick that box in the event of an inspection. So that brings us to our second myth, which is that harsh chemicals are required to kill germs. And in fairness, this was true at one point in time, because the only chemicals that were strong enough to kill germs were harsh chemicals with negative occupational safety profiles. So including things like, high concentrations of bleach, for example, phenols. But more recently, this has become a myth because newer disinfectant technologies have been developed that are harsh on germs, but remaining gentle to users, services, and the environment. So now we have solutions like prevention that's going to be highly effective against viruses, bacteria, and fungi, but really without trading off on safety. And when we talk about safety, this includes safety to the user, safety to clients, who might be in the area while you're disinfecting, but also safety to surfaces, so it's not going to cause damage or wear and tear with prolonged use, and safety to the environment, which is definitely a big focus for all businesses now, and spas are certainly included in that. So when you're looking for a disinfectant, it's important to look for a product that has both human and environmental safety covered. So including products that are formulated with biodegradable ingredients, and that have eco-friendly packaging options available, really to minimize the environmental footprint of your business as a whole. It's one thing to talk about choosing a safe disinfectant, but you might be wondering what that actually means, and even more importantly, how do what to actually look for on a product label to know that what you're choosing is a safer alternative. Thankfully, there are a few things to look out for when evaluating the safety profile of a disinfectant. So it's important to choose a product that's going to be non-irritating to eyes, non-corrosive to skin, and doesn't require the use of personal protective equipment. That being said, even if PPE or personal protective equipment is not going to be required from a safety standpoint, we always recommend wearing gloves when you're disinfecting just to protect against cross-contamination. But ideally, the disinfectant is going to be not classified for any other health hazards as well. So, things like carcinogenic ingredients or reproductive harm potentially, and also shouldn't have harsh chemical odors that could be irritating to users and clients, and can also interfere with the ambiance that you want to set within your spa environment. And so this information can be found on the Disinfectant Safety Data Sheet, or SDS, which is something that should be made available to anyone who will be using the product. But you should also be able to review a copy before purchasing the disinfectant to inform yourself about the safety profile of the product, as you're considering it. And in particular, Section 2 of the SDS contains important information about whether the product has been classified for any hazards. So, the image here represents that best case scenario. You can see that it states the disinfectant is not classified under any hazard class. There are no hazard or signal words, hazard pictograms, or hazard statements. You can also see under the other hazards, the statement that there are no substances at their given concentration which are considered hazardous for health. So definitely what to look for when reviewing an SDS. In terms of what you might want to avoid, here's an example of what hazard pictograms and statements might look like. So you can see the pictogram, that red icon there with the exclamation mark, and that indicates that the product is classified for health hazards. And then looking down below at the hazard statements, you can see the concerns around serious eye irritation and skin irritation. Another section to look at from a safety standpoint is Section 8, which indicates what PPE is required when using the disinfectant. Ideally, it'll indicate that there's none required, but again, I just want to emphasize that gloves are always recommended to protect your hands against infection. But you can see here that no eye, face, skin, or respiratory protection is required when using this product, so that would be something to look out for as well. And for an example of what PPE requirements might look like if they're on an SDS, if they are required, often you might be looking at the need for safety goggles or glasses, protective gloves, and this is particularly common when handling concentrated disinfectant products, because often the full strength concentrate will be more hazardous compared to the diluted solution. So that is something to keep in mind as well. And again, we always recommend reading and familiarizing yourself with the SDS of any disinfectants or other chemicals that are being used in your spa, and just making sure the copies are available for all staff as well. Our SDSs for prevention are easily accessible on our website, so you can download those and just place copies throughout your facility in convenient locations for staff to access. So we spent some time going over human safety, but environmental safety should also not be overlooked. So a few tips to ensure that you're choosing a more sustainable disinfectant is to look for biodegradable ingredients. So for example, hydrogen peroxide breaks down to water and oxygen, post-use. So as an active ingredient for a disinfectant, that's definitely a very positive choice. But the sustainability of a disinfectant goes beyond just the chemical itself. We also recommend focusing on other aspects like packaging, looking for eco-friendly options that that allow you to reduce plastic waste wherever possible. There are also less obvious steps you can take, such as avoiding overuse of your disinfectant to make it last longer and further reduce your overall environmental footprint. So one strategy to achieve this is by using a foaming trigger sprayer, which allows you to really easily visualize what surface has been covered as you go. So you can help, you are not spraying the disinfectant over the same area twice. And we're always happy to help as well with specific equipment recommendations to get the most mileage out of your disinfectant. We also believe in cutting back on the number of plastic containers that you're using wherever possible. And so as a result of that, we launched our prevention wipes in a convenient refill pouch format. So rather than purchasing another canister, you can get a refill pouch instead and just place that into your existing canister. And that allows you to cut down on plastic waste by 90% compared to what you'd be using if you were to go ahead and get another canister. And there's also a cost savings associated with that as well. So definitely a feature that we're excited about with prevention. So moving on to our third myth is that disinfectants kill on contact. And I'll show you what I mean by asking you what is wrong with the picture that I'm going to show you on the next slide. So this picture here is something that you may have seen done quite a bit, which is spraying a surface with disinfectant and then immediately wiping that surface dry with a cloth. And that might be okay for cleaning, where the goal is, as I mentioned earlier, just to remove dirt from the surface with a detergent. It's not going to be effective when you're trying to disinfect that surface. And this is because all disinfectants need to stay wet on the surface for a certain length of time in order to be effective. And that's what's known as the product's contact time. And while some disinfectants can kill germs as quickly as 1 minute, others might need to stay wet for as long as 10 minutes in order to work properly. So you want to look for a disinfectant with a fast contact time for operational efficiency, but also for that confidence that the solution is going to stay wet for long enough to kill germs without needing to be reapplied. And so some disinfectants, particularly high alcohol-based solutions, tend to evaporate pretty quickly. So the ideal combination would be a disinfectant that kills viruses, bacteria, and fungi in just 1 minute, but also stays wet for long enough to do its job. And the disinfectant contact time is also something that can be found on the label itself under the directions for use. So our fourth myth is that when it comes to cleaning and disinfection, one size fits all. And what I mean by that is it can be tempting to think that all surfaces are the same when it comes to cleaning and disinfection. That it's just as simple as spraying the surface and then walking away. But we recommend having specific protocols that are tailored to the different services that you might provide. So for instance, massage stones that are covered in oils and other debris might need to be pre-cleaned with soap and water, prior to disinfection. Whereas a less heavily soiled surface, like let's say a massage table or a face cradle, might be wiped with a disinfectant wipe. So we'll go through a few examples of service-specific protocols that can be easily implemented after each client appointment. So when you're thinking about where to disinfect within your spa, the two main areas to consider would be client contact areas, so often where a service is going to be performed. And that includes, a variety of different services. It could be aesthetics, massage therapy, nail services, which would include foot baths as well. And then as well as guest service areas. So things like reception areas and waiting rooms where clients might be spending time before or after their appointment. And so something that we recommend is making a checklist of surfaces in your spa that are going to need to be disinfected, really just to make sure that nothing is going to get missed in the process. So for aesthetic services and massage therapy, you can see a sample checklist of client contact surfaces and equipment that would be cleaned and disinfected after each appointment. So other infection prevention tips for these areas include things like laundering linens after each use, replacing disposable bed covers after each client. And it's important to keep in mind that just because a surface is covered by some type of disposable or washable cover or liner doesn't mean that disinfection is not going to be required. So tables, chairs, and face cradles are still going to be disinfected even if you're using some type of cover or liner, just to provide confidence that when the next client comes in, they're going to be safe from germs. So really layering these different methods for the best result. For disinfection of foot baths, the protocols that you're going to use are going to depend on the type of foot bath. So in other words, whether the foot bath is a circulating or a non-circulating foot bath. And a non-circulating foot bath is also sometimes referred to as a basin-style foot bath. So for non-circulating foot baths, the process is going to be simpler because you can just drain the foot bath, take out any removable jets or other parts, and then just disinfect it as you would with any other surface. So cleaning the surface and then spraying on your disinfectant. But with circulating foot baths, these have piping often that's not going to be accessible to spray or wipe with the disinfectant. You can't really reach into the piping with the disinfectant. So with these, there's going to be that additional step of filling the entire basin with the disinfectant and then running the foot bath to circulate the disinfectant through the piping. And as a result of this, you'll see that circulating foot baths tend to be a little bit less common these days in favor of non-circulating, just because from an infection prevention standpoint, they are a lot easier to clean effectively in between clients without using a lot of disinfectant. For foot bath disinfection, I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, but fungal infections are something that's of particular concern with this application. So it's definitely recommended to use a disinfectant that's going to kill fungi with a rapid contact time. And just as I mentioned previously on the last slide, even if you're using some type of liner in the foot bath, disinfection is still going to be required. So guest services areas are also going to contain surfaces that need to be cleaned and disinfected. So examples including, countertops and chairs, point of sale equipment like a debit pin pad, as you can see in the photo there, doorknobs, door handles, things like that. And within these areas, we recommend assigning roles for cleaning and disinfection so that everybody understands who's accountable for ensuring that these surfaces have not been missed. So we have a high-touch surface protocol available on our website, and that's ideal for a variety of different non-treatment surfaces throughout a spa. And that can be posted just as a reminder to staff to disinfect these surfaces at least on a daily basis. So our last myth is that infection prevention is just common knowledge. And what I mean by that is that it can be tempting to think that it's not important to invest in training and communication, and that you can just assume that everybody will automatically be on the same page. But communicating protocols both to staff as well as to clients is crucial in ensuring consistency in your approach to infection prevention. So in terms of team training, something that we definitely recommend is getting your team certified in infection prevention. We have a complimentary certification course available on our website, which has, tailored modules for particular services. So we definitely encourage you to give that a try. Aside from certification, posting protocols in easily accessible locations can also help really make sure that everybody is aware of the proper procedures and is on the same page about that. And check-ins with the team to ensure everybody's understanding what needs to be done and is on the same page about protocols and procedures. It will really help make sure that that surfaces don't get missed and that everything's disinfected properly. It's also important to communicate to your clients about what's being done to keep them safe as well. There's definitely an increased awareness around infection prevention that clients have coming out of the pandemic. And I think that's also led to greater expectations that proper protocols are going to be in place. And so things like tent cards, window decals, door hangers are great pieces really to provide that assurance to clients that, surfaces are being cleaned and disinfected, before and after their appointments. Also things like making the certification visible to clients, having disinfectant wipe canisters in locations that clients are seeing, so they're knowing that there's that attention to disinfection specifically. And just those conversations with clients too. So just talking to clients about what's being done, what infection prevention practices are in place is definitely something that we feel they will appreciate as well. And so just to recap, in terms of the 5 myths. So the first one is, if a surface looks clean, it must be safe. So really speaking to the fact that, disinfection is going to be required using an EPA registered hospital grade disinfectant in order to protect clients and your team against the threat of infection. Then moving on to myth 2, that harsh chemicals are needed to are required in order to kill germs. Disinfectants should be highly effective, but without those trade-offs when it comes to occupational safety, material compatibility, or environmental safety. So safe for people, surfaces, as well as the planet. Myth number 3 was that disinfectants kill on contact, whereas in reality, every disinfectant needs to stay wet for a particular contact time, but choosing a product with a rapid contact time can help improve efficiency of the cleaning disinfection process, but also help ensure compliance, making sure that it is going to be effective before it dries from the surface, and you're not going to need to apply multiple times for that effectiveness. Then the 4th myth, so when it comes to cleaning and disinfection protocols, one size fits all. And really, we went through some examples of where you'd customize protocols for unique applications. So for things like massage equipment, like massage stones and cups, foot bath disinfection as well. And we have specific protocols available on our website as well that you can download for different services. And then the last one, that infection prevention is just common knowledge. And, the reason that we bring this up again is that, we feel it's important that everyone is trained on infection prevention practices, and that there is communication both within a team in a spa as well as communication to clients about what's being done to keep them safe. So with that, I'd like to wrap up and just encourage you to get in touch with us if you want to learn more about prevention. We definitely encourage you to go to our website to check out the resources available. And I'll just put a link up to that as well. You can also find us on social media at Prevention Disinfectants. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for joining today. And if you have any questions, please send them our way. Thanks.